Most people who try to understand Asia make the same mistake. They pick one lens, they look through it, and they think they understand something. They don't. In the last episode, I asked a question, is Asia the next century? And I told you I wasn't going to answer it simply because it cannot be answered simply. The forces pointing toward an Asian century are real. The forces working against it are equally real. And the only honest thing to do is to look at both, clearly without a predetermined conclusion. But here is what I didn't tell you yet, how we're going to look at it. Because the method matters. The lens you choose determines what you see. And the reason so much commentary on Asia misses, the reason it feels incomplete, or slightly off, or 10 years behind reality, is that people have chosen a single lens and never questioned whether it was the right one. We are going to use three angles, three ways of seeing Asia simultaneously, not because we enjoy complexity for its own sake, but because this is genuinely what the subject requires. On the 1st of July, this channel officially launches. What you have watched so far, including this episode, are premieres, early windows into what ETRUST Asia is building. From the 1st of July, new episodes will follow regularly, each one using these three angles to go deeper into different corners of this region. Today, I want you to understand what those angles are, and more importantly, why each of them reveals something the others cannot. The three angles are geographical, generational, and institutional. Let me take each one in turn. The first angle is geographical. Geography is the oldest lens and the most underestimated. When most people talk about Asia geographically, they flatten it. They treat it as one region with one story, rising, growing, converging. But Asia is not one geography. It is 5 or 6 distinct geographies, each with its own internal logic, its own history of power and conflict, its own relationship with the sea, the land, and the capital that flows across both. Consider 2 maritime corridors that define the region differently. The South China Sea handles more than a third of global maritime trade. It connects Northeast Asia to Southeast Asia, passes through some of the most contested waters on Earth, and sits at the intersection of ambitions, Chinese, American, Vietnamese, Filipino, and others, that are not converging. They are competing. The question of who controls these waters, or who sets the rules of passage through them, is not abstract. It will determine the terms of trade, the insurance premiums of shipping companies, the routing decisions of supply chains for the next generation. The Indian Ocean tells a different story. It connects South Asia to the Gulf, to East Africa, to Southeast Asia. It is the corridor through which energy moves, oil from the Gulf, gas from Australia, and through which China's Belt and Road has tried, with varying success, to build strategic footholds in ports from Gwadar to Hambantota to Djibouti. The Indian Ocean is where India's ambition to be a great maritime power collides quietly, methodically, with China's desire to break out of what Chinese strategists call the first island chain. These 2 corridors are not separate stories. They are connected, and the tension between them, between the Pacific-facing world and the Indian Ocean world, is one of the great geopolitical dynamics of our time, and one that is almost entirely absent from mainstream financial commentary on Asia. Closer to home, the Pearl River Delta, the Greater Bay Area, is one of the most consequential economic zones on Earth right now. Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Macau, and 7 other cities, forming a combined economy larger than many G20 nations. A zone where finance, manufacturing, technology, and governance all interact in ways that are genuinely unprecedented. And yet, it is profoundly underreported outside of headline numbers. We will go deep there. Geography is not destiny, but it is the foundation. The physical world shapes the political world shapes the economic world, and the economic world shapes everything else. You cannot understand capital flows in Asia without understanding the geographic logic that underlies them. The second angle is generational. This is the angle that almost no one covers adequately, and it may be the most consequential of the 3. Asia is in the middle of the largest intergenerational wealth transfer in human history. That is not an exaggeration. Estimates vary, but the figure most serious analysts converge on is somewhere between 15 and 30 trillion US dollars. moving from one generation to the next, across Asian families, across cultures, across jurisdictions, over the next 2 to 3 decades. To put that in context, the GDP of the entire United States is approximately $27 trillion. Asia's intergenerational wealth transfer will be of comparable scale. And unlike a national economy, it will happen largely in private, inside families, inside trusts, inside structures that are not publicly disclosed and not well understood. This is not simply a story about money. It is a story about values, about what the generation that built the wealth believes should happen to it, and what the generation inheriting it actually wants to do with it. The founders of Asia's great family enterprises built their wealth in a specific context: post-war recovery, post-colonial nation building, rapid industrialization. They built with a specific set of values: loyalty to family, accumulation over distribution, control over transparency, relationships over contracts. Many of them built extraordinary things under extraordinary conditions. Their children and grandchildren have grown up in a different world. They are educated globally, in London, in Toronto, in Singapore, in Sydney. They carry values that are, in many cases, genuinely different, more oriented toward impact, toward sustainability, toward openness about wealth and its responsibilities. And they are inheriting not just the assets, but the obligations to employees, to family members, to communities that the founders built over lifetimes. The negotiation between those two value systems playing out inside families across the region right now is reshaping Asia's business landscape. Which industries get capital and which don't? Which governance models survive and which are reformed? Which cities become magnets for next-generation Asian wealth and which are left behind? Hong Kong is living this story in real time. So is Singapore. So is every city in Southeast Asia that is competing to be the family office destination of choice for the next generation of Asian wealth. The generational angle is where the financial story and the human story converge. We will not separate them. The third angle is institutional. By institutional, I mean the structures, legal, regulatory, governance, through which wealth, power, and legitimacy are organized, protected, and transferred. This is the least visible of the three angles, and often the most important. Asia's institutional landscape is one of the most complex on earth. Common law jurisdictions, Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, India, sit alongside civil law systems in continental East and Southeast Asia. Ancient governance traditions, some of them millennia old, coexist with modern regulatory frameworks that were imported from the outside world, adapted imperfectly, and now operate under pressures their designers never anticipated. The gap between the formal institutional framework and the way things actually work, what economists call the informal institutional environment, is larger in Asia than almost anywhere else. And that gap is where much of the real story lives. Take trust law as one example. The common law trust, developed in medieval England, refined over centuries in British courts, has become one of the most important legal instruments in Asian wealth management. Families across Asia use trust structures to hold assets, to plan succession, to manage complexity across borders and generations. And yet most of the families using these structures do not fully understand them. Most of the advisors recommending them do not fully understand the cross-jurisdictional implications, and the regulatory frameworks governing them are evolving rapidly in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in the offshore centers that have historically been the default choice in ways that matter enormously and are almost entirely unreported outside specialist publications. This is the institutional angle, the gap between what the rules say and what is actually happening. The way governance is adapting, or failing to adapt, to the scale and speed of Asian wealth. The way regulatory regimes are being rewritten as governments compete for capital and families search for certainty. You cannot understand Asian wealth without understanding its institutional architecture, and you cannot understand that architecture without the kind of practitioner knowledge that comes from working inside it, not observing it from the outside. That is what we bring. Three angles: geographical, generational, institutional. Here is what I want you to notice. They do not operate independently. They are constantly in conversation with each other. The geography of the South China Sea affects where capital flows, which affects how families plan their succession, which affects which institutional frameworks they choose, and which jurisdictions compete to attract them. Pull one thread and you move all the others. That interconnection is exactly why a single lens always fails. Asia is not a geographic story or a generational story or an institutional story. It is all three simultaneously, and the insight lives in the space between them. Is Asia the next century? We do not yet know, but we now have the three angles we need to find out. From the 1st of July, this channel is live. New episodes will follow regularly, each one going deeper into a different region, a different family story, a different institutional question. Always through these three lenses, always with the same commitment to honesty, depth, and balance. And for those who want to go further on the institutional side, trust law, governance structures, wealth architecture, the technical frameworks that sit beneath the headline story, that is what ETRUST Academy is being built for. A separate but connected series running alongside this one for those who want to move from understanding to knowledge. We will say more about that soon. I'm Matthew. This is ETRUST Asia. Subscribe, and I'll see you on the other side of launch. If today's conversation sparked something in you, a question, a new lens, or simply the desire to hear more, we invite you to subscribe. Each episode, we go deeper. New voices, new ideas, and new dimensions of the subjects that matter. This is an ongoing journey, and we'd love for you to be part of it. Subscribe, share with someone who'd appreciate it, and join us for what comes next.